My name is Kesha Monroe. I am 41 years old. 3 days before everything changed, my husband looked straight at me while I was burning with fever and said something I will never forget. He called me a sick and useless little dog. He told me he had already filed for divorce. He ordered me to leave his house by the next morning. He believed I was poor. He believed I had nothing. He believed I depended on him for everything. He was completely wrong. Before I explain how his world fell apart and how he came to regret every cruel word he said, I need to take you back to that night. Because that night was the beginning of the end for him. 3 days earlier, I was lying in bed and I could barely move. My body felt like it was on fire. My temperature was very high. My head felt like someone was striking it again and again with a hammer. My throat hurt so badly that swallowing felt like swallowing broken glass. Every breath caused sharp pain in my chest. I was shaking so hard that the bed sheets were soaked with sweat. I had been like that for 2 full days. That morning I had asked my husband Darnell Tyrone Carter to bring me medicine. I asked for simple things. Fever medicine. Antibiotics. Nothing complicated. Just help for his sick wife. Midnight came and went. He was still not home. The house felt empty and strange. The only sound was the ticking of the clock in the living room. It felt like the clock was counting down something important. I tried to reach for the glass of water on my bedside table. My hands were shaking so much that I could not hold it. The glass slipped and fell. Water spilled across the rug. I was too weak to clean it. I just stared at the ceiling and wondered where my husband was. Darnell had not always been like this. When we first married, he was kind and warm. But about a year earlier, he was promoted at work. After that, he changed. He became proud and arrogant. He started coming home late. Sometimes he arrived at 3 or 4 in the morning. When I asked where he had been, he became angry. He blamed me for everything. The house was not clean enough. Dinner was not good enough. I was not good enough. Then 3 months before that terrible night, I started getting sick often. I coughed constantly. I felt tired all the time. Instead of caring for me, Darnell mocked me. He called me the sickly woman. He said it with disgust. He forgot everything I had done for him. He forgot the early years when we lived in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn that was full of insects and problems. He forgot the nights we worried about paying rent. He forgot the time he lost his job and stayed on the couch for months feeling useless and angry. I had stayed beside him. I had encouraged him. I had believed in him when he did not believe in himself. But now none of that mattered. That night I finally heard his car pull into the driveway. For a moment relief filled me. He was home. He must have brought the medicine. I tried to sit up. The front door slammed loudly. His footsteps were heavy and fast. They did not sound gentle. They did not sound worried. They sounded angry. The bedroom door opened suddenly. There he stood, tall and confident. He was wearing expensive clothes. His hair was perfect. His face still looked handsome. But his eyes were cold. Very cold. He was not holding medicine. He was holding a thick brown folder. I whispered his name and asked about the medicine. I told him my head hurt and I still had a fever. He laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was cruel and sharp. He said he had brought something better than medicine. He said it was a cure for his life. Then he threw the folder onto the bed. My mind was slow because of the fever. I asked what it was. He told me to open it. My hands were shaking so badly that I struggled to open the folder. Finally, I pulled out the papers. At the top, I saw the words petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce papers. Everything inside me froze. I looked up at him hoping it was a terrible joke. It was not. He sat far away from me as if I disgusted him. He called me sick. He called me useless. He said he did not want to spend his life taking care of a burden. He said he had already filed the papers. He stood and paced the room like he was giving a speech. He said he was tired of seeing me cough. He said I was dragging him down. I asked him what I had done wrong. He said my mistake was being poor. He pointed around the bedroom and said everything belonged to him. The house. The furniture. The cars. He said everything was in his name. He said I would not receive a single penny. Then he told me he planned to marry another woman named Simone. He said she was younger and healthier. He said she understood his success. I felt my heart break in pieces. He told me to leave before dawn. He said I could take nothing except the clothes on my body. He said he would sleep at Simone's place that night. Then he left. The door slammed again. His car drove away fast. I was alone. Very sick. Being divorced. Being thrown out. I cried harder than I had ever cried in my life. I cried for my marriage. I cried for the man I once loved. I cried for the years I gave him. After about 15 minutes, something inside me changed. The tears stopped. I wiped my face. Under the pain, something cold and strong rose inside me. Not hatred. Not fear. Determination. I reached under an extra pillow beside me and pulled out a phone that Darnell did not know existed. It was newer and more advanced than the phone on my table. It had no social media and no games. Only secure business tools. I opened it with my fingerprint and pressed one contact. Director Valencia Thompson. She answered immediately. I told her the contingency plan was activated. She became serious at once and asked what happened. I told her Darnell had evicted me and filed for divorce. I told her I was very ill and needed private medical help. I asked her to bring the special medical team from Kings Mountain Clinic quietly. No sirens. No attention. She agreed. I told her the game had just begun. Within half an hour, she arrived with the medical team. They moved quietly and professionally. They placed me on a stretcher. They gave me medicine to reduce the fever for the transfer. They carried me out of the house. I looked once at the wedding photo on the wall. It felt like a lie. We left everything behind. The vehicle outside was not an ordinary ambulance. It was a black van that looked simple from the outside, but inside it was a fully equipped medical unit. As they treated me, my mind went back 5 years. 5 years earlier, Darnell had lost his job. He was depressed and ashamed. He told me not to work. He said he would provide. But I had a degree in biochemical engineering. I had ideas. While he searched for work, I started experimenting in our kitchen. I was not cooking meals. I was creating skincare products using natural ingredients and recipes from my grandmother. I used my savings to buy high-quality materials. After months of testing, I developed a facial serum and a cream that produced remarkable results. I opened a small online shop. At first, only friends bought from me. Then more customers came through word of mouth. Orders increased quickly. When Darnell got a new job, his pride returned. He mocked me for always being on my phone at night. He did not know I was answering hundreds of customers. Later, I attended a seminar for women entrepreneurs and met Valencia Thompson. She was a retired executive with strong business knowledge. I showed her my products and my plans. She believed in me. Together, we built Monroe Luxury Group. I remained the owner behind the scenes. She became the public face and chief executive. I asked to keep my identity private. I thought I was protecting my marriage. The company grew fast. From skincare, we expanded into luxury clothing and accessories. We entered markets around the world. Our profits were enormous. My personal monthly income reached $1.5 million. The company total revenue was many times that. Darnell never suspected anything. When he bought the luxury house and sports cars, he took a large loan from the bank. Later, when his side investments failed and he almost defaulted on the loan, my company quietly purchased his debt through a subsidiary. That meant the house and cars were tied to my company. Everything he believed was his actually belonged to Monroe Luxury Group. He never knew. Back in the medical vehicle, I instructed Director Thompson to begin asset recovery in 3 days. I wanted him to enjoy his false victory first. She agreed. At the clinic, I received excellent care. My fever decreased. My strength returned quickly. Meanwhile, Darnell spent the night with Simone celebrating. He believed I was homeless and helpless. The next morning, he returned to the house with Simone. They found it perfectly clean. My clothes were gone. The room looked untouched. He felt uneasy but ignored it. He planned a celebration party. When he tried to pay the catering deposit, his card was declined. He tried again and again. All his cards failed. His bank account access was blocked. Panic began. Later, a courier delivered a legal demand letter. It stated that his business loan was due in full within 3 days. The lender was Monroe Luxury Group Holdings. Failure to pay would result in seizure of the house and cars. He was shocked. The next morning, he went to the bank. The manager informed him that his loan had been sold to Monroe Luxury Group months earlier and that his accounts had been drained due to breach of contract. He called the law firm listed in the letter. They explained that he violated a moral clause in the loan agreement by abandoning his very ill wife and living with another woman. They had evidence. He realized it was connected to me. He tried to find me at my parents' home, but they refused to help him. Simone began to panic and argued with him. She realized his wealth was collapsing. On the third day, legal officers arrived at the house with security. They informed him that the grace period was over. They began seizing property. Tow trucks took the sports car. Court officials placed foreclosure notices on the door. Simone packed her bags and left him without hesitation. He was dragged out of the house wearing only pajamas. He sat on the sidewalk in disbelief. He called me crying and begging. I answered calmly. I reminded him that he said it was his house. I told him we were no longer married. Then I revealed the truth. I told him I was the owner of Monroe Luxury Group. I told him Director Thompson was my chief executive. He dropped the phone in shock. Soon after, he was brought to the MLG building lobby. I walked out of a private elevator dressed in a powerful blue suit. Employees greeted me with respect. He knelt at my feet crying and begging for forgiveness. I told him my company does not hire dogs. In a conference room, he was shown financial reports and video evidence of his affair and cruelty. Hidden cameras had recorded everything. He signed a confession to avoid further charges. I tore up the divorce papers he had filed and told him I was divorcing him instead. I made sure he would receive nothing from me. He was thrown out of the building. After that, his life collapsed completely. Friends refused to help him. He slept in parks. He worked as a day laborer carrying heavy sacks under the hot sun for very little money. His hands became rough and injured. His body weakened. His pride disappeared. Simone also fell into trouble and lost everything. One afternoon, he sat on a sidewalk with a small meal of rice and vegetables. Across the street, a giant screen showed a live broadcast of me speaking at an international business conference. I was introduced as one of the most influential women in global business. When asked about the secret of my success, I said there was no secret. I said I never stopped believing in my worth, even when someone close to me underestimated me. He dropped his food onto the dirty pavement. He looked at his calloused hands and then at the screen. He understood what he had lost. Months passed. He remained poor and broken. I continued expanding my company and building new ventures. In the end, the man who called me a dog ended up sitting in the gutter with nothing. And I rose higher than ever. That is my story. I was called sick and worthless. I was abandoned when I was ill. But I knew my value. I protected myself quietly. I worked in silence. And when the time came, the truth was revealed. Never let anyone define your worth. Never allow someone else to limit your future. And remember that actions always bring consequences. My name is Kesha Monroe. I was underestimated. I was insulted. I was thrown away. And I became the queen of my own empire. After that day in the lobby of my company, I did not think about Darnell for a while. I had business to run. I had meetings to attend. I had markets to enter and contracts to sign. My life did not pause just because his had collapsed. But even when you move forward, the past sometimes returns in quiet ways. A few weeks after the confrontation in the lobby, Director Thompson came into my office with a folder. Her expression was calm, but I could see that something unusual had happened. She told me that Darnell had tried to contact the company several times. He had sent emails from public computers at libraries. He had written long messages full of apologies and desperation. He said he wanted to speak with me in person. He said he would do anything for another chance. I listened quietly. There was a time when hearing his voice cry would have broken me. But that time was gone. Something inside me had changed permanently. I no longer felt the need for his approval. I no longer felt the need to defend myself to him. I asked Director Thompson to ignore the messages. No reply. No acknowledgement. Silence was more powerful than anger. While Darnell struggled, I focused on healing fully. The fever had left my body, but I still needed rest. I moved from the clinic into a private residence owned by the company for executives who required privacy. It was peaceful and secure. For the first time in years, I had time to think about myself. Not about being a wife. Not about supporting a husband. Not about shrinking to protect someone else's ego. Just me. I began meeting regularly with a therapist. Not because I felt weak, but because I wanted to understand why I had tolerated so much disrespect for so long. I wanted to make sure that I would never again silence my own strength to protect someone else's pride. During those sessions, I realized something important. I had hidden my success not only for Darnell. I had hidden it because I was afraid of being seen as too powerful. I was afraid of intimidating the man I loved. I thought shrinking myself was kindness. It was not kindness. It was self-betrayal. That lesson became more valuable than any business strategy. Meanwhile, Monroe Luxury Group continued expanding. We entered new markets in the Middle East and in parts of Europe. Our fashion line launched a new collection that sold out in days. Our skincare products were now featured in luxury hotels around the world. The press began requesting interviews more often. For years, I had stayed in the shadows. Now I decided to step forward fully. I allowed my story to be told publicly, but carefully. I spoke about entrepreneurship, resilience, and self-worth. I did not mention Darnell by name. He did not deserve that importance. The more visible I became, the more messages I received from women around the world. Some were business owners. Some were mothers. Some were students. Many of them said they had been underestimated. Many said they had been mocked for their dreams. They thanked me for speaking openly about believing in yourself, even when the closest person to you does not. Those messages meant more to me than any profit report. About 3 months after the asset seizure, Director Thompson informed me that Darnell had been officially terminated from Carter Industries as planned. His reputation in the industry was severely damaged. The signed confession protected me legally, and it protected the company from any slander. He tried to find other corporate jobs, but no major company wanted to hire someone who had publicly violated a moral clause and lost a legal battle against Monroe Luxury Group. In business, reputation is everything. I felt no pleasure in his suffering anymore. At first, I had felt satisfaction. Now I felt distance. One evening, as I reviewed quarterly reports in my office, I looked out at the city lights below. I remembered the night he called me a dog. I remembered lying in that bed burning with fever. If I had not prepared quietly for years, if I had not built my independence in secret, that night could have destroyed me completely. That realization made me create something new. I announced the Monroe Foundation for Women in Innovation. The foundation provided funding, mentorship, and legal support for women who were building businesses but facing obstacles at home or in society. We offered confidential legal advice for women trapped in financially controlling relationships. We provided emergency housing for those who needed to leave unsafe situations. This was not revenge. This was purpose. At the official launch event, I stood on stage and spoke about economic independence. I said that love should never require shrinking your talent. I said partnership should not demand silence. The applause was powerful and genuine. In another part of the city, Darnell was working long hours in manual labor. I later learned through reports that he had moved into a small shared room with other day laborers. His body had changed. His confidence had disappeared. He avoided places he once loved because he was ashamed. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. While attending a community outreach event organized by the Monroe Foundation, I visited a local market district to meet small business owners. It was a scheduled visit with security, but the environment was public. As I walked through the market greeting vendors, I noticed a familiar figure in the distance. Thin, sunburned, wearing worn clothes. It was Darnell. He was carrying heavy boxes from a delivery truck. He did not see me at first. For a moment, time seemed to slow. I did not feel anger. I did not feel triumph. I felt clarity. He finally looked up. Our eyes met across the busy market street. The box slipped slightly in his hands. He froze. I did not approach him. I did not speak. I simply held his gaze for a few seconds. In that look there was no hatred. There was no love. There was only finality. Then I turned and continued walking with my team. That brief moment was more powerful than any speech or legal victory. It confirmed that the chapter was truly closed. That night Darnell sent one final message through a public email account. He wrote that seeing me that day made him understand fully what he had destroyed. He wrote that he would live with regret for the rest of his life. I did not respond. Forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation. Sometimes forgiveness means releasing the past without reopening the door. Over the next year, my life continued to grow in new directions. I purchased a home in my own name. Not extravagant. Not for show. A home that felt peaceful and secure. Every room reflected my taste, not anyone else's expectations. I traveled more for business and for pleasure. I visited cities I had only seen in magazines when I was younger. I met leaders from different industries. I spoke at conferences about innovation and ethical leadership. But the most meaningful moments were quiet ones. Mornings when I drank tea on my balcony without tension. Evenings when I read books without fear of criticism. Days when I worked because I loved the work, not because I needed to prove something. Sometimes people ask if I ever considered helping Darnell financially after everything. The answer is no. Not because I hate him, but because consequences teach lessons that comfort never can. He chose pride over partnership. He chose cruelty over compassion. He chose appearance over integrity. And I chose growth. If there is something I learned through all of this, it is that power does not need to shout. True power prepares quietly. It builds steadily. It waits patiently. When the moment comes, it stands tall. Today Monroe Luxury Group continues to expand into new industries. We invest in sustainable technology. We partner with international designers. We mentor young entrepreneurs. My name is no longer hidden. And most importantly, I no longer hide myself. The woman who lay in bed burning with fever could have been broken. She could have accepted the insults as truth. She could have believed she was worthless. Instead, she reached under a pillow and chose strength. That choice changed everything. Life did not become perfect after that. It became honest. There is a difference. After the day I saw Darnell in the market carrying heavy boxes, something inside me settled completely. I did not feel the need to check on him again. I did not ask Director Thompson for updates anymore. I did not want reports about where he worked or how he was surviving. His life was no longer my responsibility. Mine was. The Monroe Foundation for Women in Innovation grew faster than I expected. At first, we funded a small number of women who were building home businesses quietly. Some made handmade skincare. Some designed clothing. Some wrote software from their living rooms. Many of them had partners who did not take them seriously. Their stories sounded familiar. One woman told me her husband laughed at her late-night work. Another said her boyfriend monitored her bank account and questioned every expense. Another said she hid her savings in a separate account because she feared being controlled. I listened carefully. I did not tell them to leave their partners. I did not tell them to destroy their relationships. I told them something simpler. Know your value. Protect your independence. Build quietly if you must. But never stop building. We created workshops on financial literacy. We offered legal advice for women who needed to understand contracts. We provided mentorship from executives inside Monroe Luxury Group. Every time I watched a woman sign her first independent business contract, I felt something powerful. It was not revenge. It was restoration. Months turned into a year. The press still covered my story occasionally. They loved the dramatic rise narrative. They loved the idea of a hidden empire and a cruel husband who lost everything. But I stopped giving interviews that focused on revenge. I redirected conversations toward resilience and ethical leadership. I did not want to be known only as the woman who destroyed her ex-husband. I wanted to be known as the woman who built something that lasted. One quiet evening, almost a year after the divorce, I received a letter at my office. Not an email. Not a message from a public computer. A physical letter. It was from Darnell. The handwriting was uneven. The paper was simple. He wrote that he had moved to another city to start over. He said manual labor had humbled him. He said losing everything forced him to confront the person he had become. He admitted he had treated me with cruelty and arrogance. He admitted he had believed money gave him superiority. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for reconciliation. He asked for forgiveness. I read the letter twice. Forgiveness is not something you announce publicly. It is not a performance. It is an internal decision. I sat in my office for a long time after reading his words. I thought about the early days of our marriage. I thought about the small apartment in Brooklyn. I thought about the nights when we shared dreams instead of resentment. Then I thought about the night he called me a dog while I was burning with fever. Both versions of him were real, but only one defined the end. I wrote a short reply. I told him I forgave him. I told him I hoped he would become a better man than the one I left behind. I did not include my address. I did not offer to meet. Forgiveness does not require reunion. After sending that letter, I felt lighter than I had in years. My personal life slowly opened again in small ways. I did not rush into dating. I did not search desperately for companionship. I enjoyed my own company. I invested in friendships I had neglected. I reconnected with relatives I had seen less during my marriage. One afternoon at a leadership summit, I met someone new. He was not impressed by titles. He did not speak loudly about his achievements. He asked thoughtful questions. He listened carefully. When he learned who I was, he did not change his tone. He did not treat me like a trophy. He treated me like a person. That difference mattered. I took my time. I paid attention to how I felt around him. Calm. Respected. Equal. For the first time in my life, I did not feel the need to shrink or to hide. Years later, when people ask me what the true turning point was, they expect me to say it was the moment Darnell lost the house, or the moment he knelt in the lobby, or the moment I revealed my identity. But that was not the true turning point. The true turning point was the night I reached under my pillow and chose to activate the contingency plan. That was the moment I stopped seeing myself as powerless. Everything else was consequence. Darnell's life moved on in its own direction. I heard through distant channels that he continued working physical jobs. He lived modestly. He stayed quiet. He never attempted to rebuild his corporate career. He never publicly blamed me. In some ways, that was his redemption. He accepted responsibility and disappeared from the spotlight. Simone's name eventually faded from gossip columns as well. The world moved on. And so did I. Monroe Luxury Group expanded into sustainable packaging and ethical supply chains. We established scholarships for young women studying science and engineering. We partnered with global organizations to promote fair labor practices. Success became less about proving something and more about building something meaningful. Sometimes I visit the original small kitchen where I first experimented with skincare formulas. I kept that apartment building as an investment property. When I walk into that tiny space, I remember the woman who mixed ingredients late at night while her husband mocked her. She was not weak. She was becoming. That memory keeps me grounded. I now live in a home filled with peace. There are no slammed doors. There are no cruel insults. There is no fear of eviction or humiliation. There is space to breathe. On quiet mornings, I sit by the window with tea and reflect on how easily my story could have ended differently. If I had believed his words. If I had depended entirely on his income. If I had allowed myself to remain financially vulnerable. Independence saved me. Not revenge. Not anger. Preparation. Out of everything that happened, this is what matters most. If someone calls you worthless, that does not make you worthless. If someone underestimates you, that does not shrink your potential. If someone abandons you, that does not erase your value. What defines you is what you build quietly when no one is watching. I was called a sickly, broke little dog. Today I am a business leader, a foundation founder, a mentor, and a woman who knows her worth. Not because I destroyed someone else, but because I refused to let myself be destroyed. If you are listening to this and you feel underestimated, start preparing. Learn. Save. Build. Protect your independence. You do not need to announce your strength. You do not need to argue with those who doubt you. Let your work speak. Let your growth answer. Let your peace become your victory. My name is Kesha Monroe. I am 41 years old. And this is not just a story about revenge. It is a story about self-worth. It is a story about preparation. It is a story about choosing strength when weakness would be easier. Never let anyone define your value. Never surrender your independence. And never forget that sometimes the most powerful move you can make is the quiet decision to rise. See you in the next story.